Welcome. In this video, we're going to be walking through a simple example of how to bring data from Excel into Power BI. So let's get started. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is navigate to my Excel file and show what we're working with. So in this demo, I have a folder for bike sales. And when I open this up, I have sales. We have, in this example, we're looking at multiple stores in 3 different states. So for instance, if I open up Minnesota, we'll see that we have 3 stores in this example. We have a Duluth store, a Minneapolis store, and a St. Cloud store. And the data that I'd like to work with is out of this Minneapolis file. So I'm going to open this Excel workbook and I'll show you the data within the file and what I'd like to bring in to my model. So this is a very simple data set, like I mentioned before. This is showing us our bike sales for the Minneapolis store. And this is broken out by 3 different types of bikes. So we have road bikes, mountain bikes, and electric bikes. And we sell both new and used bikes in this example. And the other 2 tabs are looking at the exact same data, but they're looking at previous years. That's the data we're working with. So now we'll open up Power BI. If you have it on your ribbon, you can just select it down here. Otherwise, you can search for Power BI in your search window and open it up here. If you're working with a Mac, I don't believe you can use Power BI Desktop. I don't know that it's supported on Macs. And if you're working on a PC and you don't have it installed, you can either go to Microsoft's website and install it there, or I believe you can get it from the Play Store as well. So after you've opened up the Power BI app, you probably get some pop-ups, and you can just close out of these. We don't need to read through this, so we'll close this. And then on this pop-up, it's asking about having us get started. It might ask you to sign in, and you can close out of that as well. And close. Okay, so now we're in Power BI. So in the center of our screen, we have our canvas, and this is where the visuals that we create are going to be. So this is where we'll be able to analyze our data. On the right-hand side of our screen, we have this visualizations pane, and this is where we can choose from different visuals. Like we can pick what visuals we want to see on our canvas. So we could look at pie charts, we could look at scatter plots, area charts, donut charts, all sorts of different stuff here. Further to the right, we have our fields pane. So if we open this up, this is where our data is going to lie. And now since we just opened the model and we haven't connected to any data sources yet, we're not going to have data to choose from just yet. Across the top of our screen, we have different ways to connect to data. So we can connect to Excel workbooks, different things like that. We can insert different buttons and shapes and visuals, things like that. But we're going to want to focus on the Home tab. So the first thing we're going to want to do in Power BI, and this is always the first thing that you do when you're starting a new dashboard, is you're going to want to connect to data. So we're going to select the drop down here to get data. And here we see we have a list of multiple different data sources we can connect to. And if we click on more, it'll show us the complete list of connectors or different data sources that we can gather our data from. So here we have the different data connection options. So a lot of times we're going to just connect to an Excel workbook, but you can also connect to comma-separated value files. You can connect to a folder. This is really powerful because you can bring in multiple files at once. You can connect to a SharePoint folder, so data within SharePoint, access databases, SQL servers, all sorts of different stuff here. But what we're looking for is just an Excel workbook. So we'll select it here, and we'll click on Connect. And you would also been able to just select Excel right here. I just wanted to show the different connection options that we have. Okay, so now we're looking for an Excel workbook. I'm just going to go to my desktop, open the demo, looking for bike sales in the state of Minnesota, and here we're just going to connect to our Minneapolis sales report. So click on open. And now this is going to open the Power Query Editor. This is a separate window, and it's the behind the scenes work that allows for the creation of the dashboard. So in the navigator here, you'll see that we have 3 different tabs that Power BI, or 3 different data sets Power BI found within our Excel file. So we've got our tab for 2022, 2021, and 2020. And if I go back to Excel, you'll see that we have the 3 different tabs here. So I'm just going to select the 2022 tab that we want to navigate to. And you'll notice that when I select these tabs, the data is previewed on the right-hand side here. But I'm going to check the 2022 data set and click on Transform Data. Okay, so now that we're in the Power Query Editor, let's just walk through what we're looking at here. So in the center of our screen, we have our data preview. So this is showing us the data as of our current applied steps, and we'll walk through that in just a moment. On the left-hand side of our screen, we have our queries pane, and every time we connect to a new data source, it's going to generate a new query. And so we'll be able to switch between queries by selecting them, and obviously that's going to update our data preview to show us the data within the selected query. Across the top of our screen, we have the different data transformations that we can make to our data set. So for instance, maybe I want to remove the top 2 rows of data. I could go up to the Remove Rows option, select the drop-down, select Remove Top Rows, and here I'm going to specify that I would like to remove the top 2 rows. Click OK. Now you see the top 2 rows of our data set have been removed from the data preview. And then the last thing I'd like to touch on is the list, is this applied steps section. So as we go through and clean up our data set, we might do, maybe we remove columns, we remove rows, we replace values, all sorts of different changes. Every time we make a transformation to our data set, it's going to generate a new applied step. So let's just walk through the applied steps and see what's going on here. So if we select our first applied step, this is the source step, this is going to walk us through where our data is coming from. So we're going to walk through and look at the formula bar here. If you're not seeing your formula bar, you can go to View and check the formula bar option. This will show or hide the formula bar. Additionally, if you lose this query settings pane where we have our list of applied steps, say you accidentally close out of this or yours isn't appearing, you can go to View on the ribbon and select Query Settings, and that will bring that query settings box back up. So anyways, we are on the applied step of source, and this first step is where we connect to an Excel workbook. So if we go back, if I minimize the query editor window and go back to where we were before, you'll recall that the first thing we did is we connected to an Excel workbook. And if we look back at the query editor, you see in the formula bar for the source step, it says equals excel.workbook. And the next thing we did is we browsed for our file. So here you'll see that my file was on my desktop under the demo, bike sales, Minnesota, and the file was minneapolis.xlsx. Now our data preview on this applied step is showing us the different data sets Power BI found within the Excel file provided. So here we have the name of the tab and some other details. And each row in this case is showing us a different data set. So here we have the 2022 tab, the 2021 tab and the 2020 tab, otherwise known as sheets within the Excel workbook. Now, if we had tables within Power BI, those would also show up in this data preview. The next applied step we have is navigation. So if we select this and look in the formula bar, you'll see that it says item equals 2022, kind equals sheet, and we're pulling the data column. So let's take a step back and see what that means. Just take a quick screenshot of this, what we're showing in the formula bar. And so if we go back to the source step, you'll notice that we have a column called item right here. And in the navigation step, we said that the item must equal 2022. So basically, it's applying a filter to this column so that it only returns rows that show 2022 in the item column, as well as only showing the kind of sheet. So kind of sheet. So basically, it's just showing this first row, and then it's extracting the data from that, or it's extracting, the data from that file. Okay. And so now the data preview is showing the data within this tab of our workbook. So we have our bike type, bike condition, and sales. The next applied step is promoted headers. So what's going on in this step is, I'll just back up a moment. It's taking the promoted header step is going to take the data that's in row 1, so bike type, bike condition, and sales, and use that to replace the generic column names that have been auto-generated, replacing column 1, column 2, column 3. So if we click on promoted headers, you'll see that the data that was in row 1 is now the column headers, bike type, bike condition, sales, whereas previously it said column 1, column 2, and 3. The next applied step is change type. Before I select that, you'll notice that to the left of the column names, we have this ABC123 symbol. This is where we can identify the data type. So if I select the data type symbol, you'll see that we have a bunch of different data types. So we have some of the common ones are decimal numbers, date, and text, I would say, are probably the three most common data types that at least I use on an ongoing basis. So let's check this change type step and see what data Power BI thought was in each of these columns. So Power BI thought that the first column, bike type, was a text field, and I can tell that because the symbol is ABC, and if we select that, we'll see that the ABC symbol represents text. Same here, if we go to the bike condition, ABC, we select the drop down, we see that's a text field as well. And lastly, we have our sales, the 1.2 decimal number, or symbol. If we select that, we see that that's a decimal number data type. Now you're probably asking, what's the significance of data types? Well, later on when we go to visualize our data, there's going to be different properties available to us for each of these columns based on the type of data that's within each column. So for instance, we might want to aggregate our sales across, like for the whole year. So maybe we want to add this column and get a grand total for our sales. Or maybe we want to get an average, different things like that. So with numerical fields, we can do mathematical operations on them. Whereas with text fields, you can't add a road bike and a mountain bike and get some different kind of bike, right? That doesn't make any sense. So by identifying these data types, it allows us to analyze our data. So let's look at our last applied step. So if we select this, it says removed top rows. In this case, you can see that it removed the top 2 rows. And that was just kind of an example of showing how we can transform our data set. But that's not an actual change that I want made in our like I want those first two rows to come through in our dashboard. So if I change my mind on this applied step, I can just remove it with the X, and now it's no longer there. And with that, I think we should be good to close and apply and look at our data. So go up to the ribbon to Home and close and apply. All right, so now it's running that query. It's finding that Excel workbook. It's navigating to the 2022 tab. It's promoting the headers, changing the data types, and it's going to bring that data into our model. So I'll wait for this to run. And it's also good to know that if your source files are open, right, the files that you're connecting to and bringing the data into Power BI, if they're open, Power BI is going to refresh a little slower. So if you find that it's taking a long time, just go into those files that you're connecting to and you can close out of them. Okay, so it looks like our data has come through. And we can tell because if we look on the right-hand side here, maybe it needs one more second. There we go. So on the right-hand side here, we have our query. So our query name is 2022, and that was the sheet that we pulled our data from. We can rename this later if we'd like. We can expand this, and we'll see the different fields that are in that data set. So let's start putting some visuals together. So we could look at our sales, maybe in a pie chart. So in the visualizations pane, we have the different visuals that we can choose from. So we have like pie charts, bar charts, area charts, waterfalls, maps, scatter plots, all sorts of different visuals that we can choose from. Let's maybe start with the pie chart. So if we select that, it's going to create a pie chart on our canvas. And we can just grab one of the edges and resize. Make it a little bit bigger here. And now you can tell the visual is selected because the border has been highlighted. And so with the visual selected, I'm going to go to the Fields pane, and I'm going to bring in the Sales field into the Value section of this visual. So beneath the Visualizations pane, you can modify the selected visual. Okay, so right now it's showing us that we had sales of $4.34 million. But this isn't that great of a chart. So let's add a little bit more detail. So let's go into the Fields pane again, and let's bring in the bike type into the legend. Okay, so this is showing us a little bit more detail here. This is showing us sales for the road bike, mountain bikes, and electric bikes. Looks like it's broken out pretty evenly. And let's make this a little bit bigger. These labels are kind of hard to read. So if we go up here to format your visual, and let's modify the legend. We can change the text, and we'll bump this up to maybe font size 14. And we can do the same thing with the title. Let's make some adjustments to the title. Oh, I guess I'm still on the legend. That can probably stay bike type. I don't see a need to change that. We can collapse some of these options here. Then we'll go into general, and we'll modify the title. Okay, so right now it says sum of sales by bike type. I'm just going to change this to say instead sales, or let's call this 2022 bike sales. And if we scroll down, we can bump up the font size. Probably change this to about 24. And I'll center the title. Now let's also make adjustments to these other text fields. So here we can select visual, detail labels, values, and we'll just bump up the font size here to about 16. Make it a little easier to read. Okay. Collapse that. We can also change the label contents. So right here it's showing us the data value, the total sales, and then a percentage. We could modify this if we wanted to show category and data value, which personally I like a little bit more than the legend. So we could actually turn the legend off. It's looking a little bit better. And now maybe we want to show a slicer, so make this a little bit smaller. It's selected right now, you can tell because the border is highlighted. I'm just going to click off of that onto the canvas, the white space in the background, and I'm going to create a slicer. And this is going to be a very simple slicer. I'm just going to take the bike condition and drag that into the field section. Alright, so now we can filter between new and used bikes. And when we do, you can see our pie chart update to show those different bike conditions. So it looks like in this case, the road bikes, we sold about $893,000 of used road bikes. Whereas when we sell new bikes, it's a pretty even split between our different bike types. We can also change the visual. So maybe we don't want to see this in a pie chart. Maybe we'd rather see this in a bar chart. So you can click the visual. Once it's selected, I can go over to the different visualization options and maybe show this as a stacked column chart. And again, we'd want to update the size of our axes. But let's look at maybe doing, let's maybe show our bike condition in the legend. Oh, I was expecting to make some updates, but here we're filtered on just the new bike, so I'm going to clear this filter. And now it's showing both conditions. So obviously the slicer still works even though we changed the type of chart that we're looking at. So if I just do, you can also do undo. So if you prefer the pie chart, you can undo to get back to that. And there we go. That's our first very simple dashboard. In the next video, we'll be walking through how to bring in all of those tabs of data at the same time and merge those into a single data set so that we can track our sales by year. Hope to see you in that video.